Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth episode of Female Leadership. Third episode of the Female Leadership series. We are in season 3. I got a bit confused as we had a special episode last month. I am very happy to present several speakers, but before we actually move on to our speakers and to our discussion about breaking barriers, cultivating the diversity to shape a resilient future, I would like to talk a bit about who we are and what we do at EIT Health Innovators Community, as this is the community that brings you this webinar. First of all, I will not talk. I will show you a small video. And please, Emily, show us the video about our community so that I don't have to talk, but you can see.
Are you looking to develop groundbreaking ideas?
Maybe you're thinking of making the move from academia to entrepreneurship or turning your research into a business.
Or maybe you're the CEO of a startup looking to hire.
How about working with our team to organize your own workshop or webinar?
Whatever your thing is, we guarantee you'll find like-minded members in our network of innovators.
Our community connects every corner of Europe and beyond, creating a global wealth of expertise and ideas.
You'll also get discounted access to conferences and training, career development and mentoring.
The Innovators Community Team is here for you, so don't be shy.
Let's shape the future of healthcare together.
So sign up and build your profile now.
So as you can see, I didn't talk online or live, but yes, I did talk in the small video that we made. So what are we and what do we do exactly? As the video said, we are a community of more than 4,000 people right now. And as I like to call it, it's a LinkedIn for healthcare. We bring together several members from students to big pharma companies that can come together and innovate healthcare. So please join us. We will share the link. You can, of course, check our webpage, and please join us now. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Audrey, who will be presenting today, and all the speakers. Please, Audrey, the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. So thanks for kicking us off, and appreciate everyone who's able to join us today. We've got a great panel here. Hopefully you've had a chance to read the bios of these three wonderful people who've joined me. I'll give a really brief introduction to each of them and allow them to just give us some introduction to their perspective on this diversity topic. What is their current connection to it? What role has it played in their career? I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Audrey Powers, and I'm the Vice President of Mission and Flight Operations at a company called Blue Origin. We're a human space flight and aerospace company based primarily in Seattle, but we have locations all over the United States and in Europe. I'm currently at one of our launch sites in Texas. This is where we launch our new Shepard vehicle, and I was lucky enough to fly to space on that vehicle 2 years ago. So I'm also very passionate about this diversity issue. At Blue Origin, I'm the executive sponsor of the business resource group that focuses on gender diversity. So we provide professional development and community mentoring and focus really retention efforts on our diverse gender population. Primarily, we started with females, but now we work with all sorts of marginalized genders. So I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Jennifer Mertens, the Director of R&D Naval Systems at Rohde and Schwarz in Munich, Germany. And Jennifer, tell us a bit about your connection to our topic today.
Yes, thanks very much for having me. So I'm a physicist by nature, but I now work in Rohde and Schwarz, which is a technology company that is also acting globally and mostly in providing products and solutions from test and measurement equipment to technology systems and networks and cybersecurity. So it's a bit more in the field of electrical engineering and science and software engineering. And because I am in that field, I'm one of the few female leaders, and that has been like that throughout my entire career. So I'm automatically bound to advocate the rethinking of some historically grown structures and processes and behaviors. And I'm trying to make sure that that company that has been around for already 90 years, that they're also not for another, not sure if another 90, but at least for quite a while still. And I think we need to have a more diverse workforce in order to get there. And that's what I'm working on, next to my technical leadership, of course.
Very good. And next we have, I welcome Gloria Abraham Peralta, an international consultant in agriculture, trade, and trade negotiations in San Jose, Costa Rica. And Gloria, welcome, and give us some introduction to your connection to our topic.
Well, thank you, Audrey. And first, I would like to thank the organizers, especially Tatiana, for inviting me to participate in this event. You are a group of scientists highly specialized in topics that undoubtedly mark a milestone in the development and incorporation of women. You have really broken the barriers. My congratulations for that. In my long professional career, I have been a civil servant and an international organization's official specialized in traditionally masculine issues such as politics, trade, and agriculture. And I would like to share with you several important considerations. I'm the oldest of this group, and so I have had to open doors and windows to my female colleagues running behind me. I'm a citizen of a developing country, which already means that inclusion has not been a priority. It has been an issue that has come later. I have had the experience of being the first woman in most of my professional experiences. First woman representative of an international organization in a country, or first woman minister of agriculture, first woman ambassador of my country, Costa Rica, to the WTO, first woman chair of the WTO negotiations in agriculture, and so on. However, this experience has always generated in me a commitment to the inclusion not only of women, but of minority groups who can enrich the perspective of the organization, wherever it may be.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gloria. And last but not least, we have John Flavin. Is your sound okay?
Yes.
We lost you and you're back. Okay, great. Yeah. John is the founder and CEO of Portal Innovations, which is a life sciences venture capital firm headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, here in the U.S. So John, give us your perspective and tell us about your connection to our topic today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be available and having this conversation. I founded Portal Innovations about 4 years ago. I spent my whole career as an entrepreneur in biotech, having had the opportunity to start and take public 3 companies, all focused on developing drugs that can treat patients. Over the course of my journey, I've had the opportunity to work with and support some great woman leaders, including as chair and founder of Pyxis Oncology, a company that's based in Boston, working on novel ADC therapeutics that are now in the clinic. We have a very, very diverse team of individuals led by Lara Sullivan, Pam Keneally, and a handful of C-suite women leaders with a cross-section of not only diverse from the gender specific perspective, but also underrepresented populations. My belief, and I've taken this with me into building Portal Innovations. We now have 42 employees. We're represented by approximately 50% of women on the team, many in senior leadership positions. We are welcoming a broad, diverse set of member companies that we're investing in. And I'm also proud to say that we've invested in 45% of women-led ventures in the biotech space. And also about 50% of those companies are led by an underrepresented population. My experience in creating the conditions at Portal have been pragmatic, and really over the course and arc of my career, just a firm belief that in order to be innovative and make good business decisions, to be able to encompass and tackle large unmet needs in the marketplace, particularly in healthcare, you need many sets of individuals with different backgrounds. And so creating an environment, and in the case of Portal, where we now are operating in 4 cities, about 160,000 square feet of laboratory space, and are creating communities, over now 150 people that work in those spaces and growing in Chicago, Boston, Houston, and Atlanta. It's first and foremost to connect diverse ecosystems and neighborhoods into the biotech grid, and also represented by a whole cross-section of people that are now able to be more effective in bringing their products from the university lab bench into venture creation, onto a Series A, a B, and an IPO. And in order to do this, we've been laser focused on creating a set of leaders amongst the Portal team, having people and opening up our arms with a warm hug and creating a welcoming environment in each of those physical locations has created a community of very diverse individuals that feel very comfortable. So again, back to pragmatism, creating an environment where you can get the best and the brightest, and the best and the brightest can come from anywhere, and they're all different. We want differences in every individual, and creating a platform that rewards it, celebrates it, and supports it, and enables and trusts that diversity in a very authentic way is the way we've built Portal so far.
Great.
Tension on side. Tension on side. You've got it. Not.
I cannot get away from these safety announcements that are made at my launch site. So very sorry for if we might have a couple of those interruptions. Okay, so thanks for those introductions. This is great. I think we've got a number of different countries and a number of different industries represented today. So I think we're going to have some diverse perspectives on our topic. I think before we get into, so we're going to spend some time today discussing how we build pipelines of diverse talent, how we should think about diversity in the interview and selection process, whether we're the candidate or we are interviewing candidates. And then we're going to hopefully have time to talk about how we go about retaining our diverse talent once we found it. But first, I think it's important to understand our panelists' perspectives on what success looks like in this area. So starting with Gloria, can you give us your perspective on, are we targeting a metric or a number? Is this a data-driven measure of success that you look for? Is it more a cultural characteristic that you're trying to achieve? How do you look at success in this area?
Audrey, thank you. It is, I think it's a very important question. I think it's a mix of both criteria. I can have a lot of women and reach the metric, but not in a decision-making positions. So the metric is not enough. The culture of the organization is fundamental. If innovation, inclusion, enrichment of the ecosystem with diversity are seriously promoted within the organization values, we can achieve success. But if it is only a speech, not accompanied by positive actions of incorporation, it is a speech, not organization values. I think it's all a matter of balance.
Very good. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, there's a chat. If you have questions, we're going to try to work in questions from the audience. So please just chime in the chat if you have questions, and we'll work them in as we go here. John, what about you on the topic of how do you measure success in are we achieving diversity or not?
Yeah, and again, in a startup a company like Portal, we're building an enterprise that creates a welcoming environment in everything that we do, in how we speak with each other, how we collaborate. And really, if I look at today, 4 years into building Portal, it began early on in bringing in women leaders and individuals with diverse backgrounds from an ethnic perspective on day one has led to the continued proliferation of diversity amongst our team. And that will continue well into the future. So it's kind of at the core. It was built into the DNA on day one. And in doing that, it becomes very natural. And so stats are really important. I think they're more important as you look in the rearview mirror. But as you look at goals, I just tend to think more authentically and sincerely, kind of building on what Gloria said. Having the numbers does not mean that you're achieving, balance. It's are we really engaging across a diverse set of leaders up and down from, working in the lab, into the C-suite and into the boardroom. Is that happening? Because if it's happening, you're more likely to be making better investments that are producing better returns over the long term, because you're reaching new markets, because you're coming up with different ideas, not working in the same sound chamber or working in the sameness that often is associated with venture investments. And I think that diversity leads to metrics downstream that, from a business perspective, lead to better returns on investments. So we try to look at those kinds of things and just be generally aware of, are we creating balance? And one of the key things that I have found and am most excited about is, as you bring in and build from the beginning a very diverse group and celebrate that diversity and talk about it and make sure that you're enabling it to a greater extent, those individuals are bringing on people that look like them and are the next generation behind them. And so I really kind of look at those things. And being a small organization, you get a chance to kind of look at it on that level in a little bit more qualitative fashion. Not that the numbers don't matter, but the quality of the numbers and the engagement, to me, is what I really look more closely at.
Yeah, love it. That's great perspective. And I love the idea of paying attention to it at every level and in every role. Jennifer, how about you? How do you measure success in this area?
Yeah, I'm at along the same lines as what has been said. I also think it's not so much about the numbers. I think they increase automatically once the environment is open enough for all kinds of lifestyles. So, like, for example, if you don't need to interrupt others loudly anymore during a meeting, if the quiet ones are also heard, or if long hours in the office are not the norm, but that asynchronous communication is possible. And, if people let each other be, then that automatically comes because everyone feels comfortable. It's not, if your environment is not made for a certain kind of behavior, but if it allows all kinds of personalities, then you automatically create an environment that will drag in more and more diverse candidates, rather than trying to hit a target first and then, have the culture change through getting more people. And I think you first have to work on the existing culture.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna start into kind of our first portion of the pipeline here, and that's creating diverse talent either through STEM or through other education initiatives. So we'll start off with John. What have you seen either in your industry or in others, initiatives that really succeed at introducing, some of the technologies or anything relevant to the industry that you work with to the right diverse set of the younger generation?
It's really important to us when we think about the ability to scale a company, and biotech in general has to think about it from an existential perspective as it grows to look at the biocentury and the promise of what's happening in biology. But for it to scale, scaling, with a homogeneous population it can't work. You just can't get there. So you can't deliver on these very exciting, promising technologies that oftentimes are, coming out of, bright minds, from people with any different background. Take CRISPR, Jennifer Doudna, Berkeley, and the startups that, emerged, and now the new medicines that have come from that, with regards to products like CRISPR Therapeutics and Vertex, that are capitalizing on that technology. Founded in a woman leader's lab, a scientific perspective. That's an inspirational individual. So celebrating that type of individual within the organization, within the community, starts to illuminate then how you can tell the story to a broader community of people that need to be the next generation that needs to see themselves as part of biotech as they grow and scale. If you're going to make biomedicines, advanced therapies, there's a workforce yet to be trained and developed beyond the PhD, beyond the master's level scientists, and beyond the MD, PhD, or the MBA in the C-suite. And so the things we do in that regard are we work very closely with outside organizations, Women in Bio. We're very, very fortunate to work with the Walder Foundation, where we do joint programming around STEM. And in Chicago, that means working, with grade schools, high schools, as well as city colleges to try to expose them to what's going on in biotech, to inspire them. I run a podcast. I've run 52 episodes over the past couple of years. And the whole goal of the podcast is to try to tell the story of the individual behind the innovation and the journey and the challenges, the ups and downs of bringing an idea to the market. And those individuals are not all scientists. They're very diverse in background. And it's to humanize that process so that more people that are listening to that podcast might say, boy, I really enjoyed hearing about that person's journey. And I didn't think about biotech being for me, but you know what? I'm going to move down that pathway. I'm going to take a class, in college next year that's going to move me toward that, because I never saw myself as part of biotech. I think that type of engineered design thinking around how you're bringing those individuals, and again, back in the portal examples platform, is that we have the benefit of having convening power, beautiful laboratory spaces right in the heart of the city, that is a melting pot that we're able to kind of, bring that to life and provide that exposure.
I love the idea of representation and how much it matters that someone in college or high school at a younger age sees someone that sounds like them or looks like them or is from the same state or country that they're from. Suddenly it makes them realize, oh, someone like me can do this, and I never considered that before. I find it so important in my engineering career too. Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this? What have you seen work as far as inspiring the next generation to get involved in electrical engineering, a very, very, very challenging area?
Yeah, electrical engineering. So Germany is very known for its engineering and a bit also maybe for its sciences, but electrical engineering is very, very highly male-dominated. So you hardly find any students in there. And with physics, it's a bit better. With the sciences, usually you have around like 20% of women in the studies, but it is generally in the culture of that society, it's not perceived normal for your daughter to be more interested in engineering like topics or in STEM topics. And I realized that myself several times. So when I was a young student, I had an astronomy teacher in school, for example, who was very fond of the girls, because he said, to be honest, you girls are much smarter than the boys, at least at that age, and you get these things. And I asked him too. I said I wanted to study physics or electrical engineering or mechanical engineering. And he said, start with physics, because that's the most difficult. And if you can manage that, then you will be happy you did that. And from what I see in you, it might be a good fit for you. And I did that. And then I went up to my physics teacher and I said, I decided I want to study physics. I was all excited. And he just wondered and he looked at me, but why? You are a woman. My own physics teacher at that time. And so you see there's a big difference in perception, and the norm is the latter. And it still is. I have 2 kids now. They are 5 and 6 years old. And with my daughter, we came to kindergarten. They showed around the rooms. And they said, here is the area where they play with like little plush animals and with dolls. So this is where the girls hang out. And here you can play with wooden blocks. and that's where the boys hang out. And my daughter was all upset next to me. She said, I love playing with wooden blocks. Why wouldn't I be allowed in here? And she grows up in we're both physicists, my husband and me, so of course she grows up in a bit of a different environment than most little princesses, but they are still supposed to be the little princesses. And then we are surprised that also then, of course, during school and so on, that then they tend towards something that they get pushed into. They are still so shapeable in that age that it's very difficult once they have that perception to change that. That's why I find it very important, as I said, to have these role models and to show them. The other day I was speaking to my boy and I said, I have to go to the doctor. And in German, it makes a difference whether you have a male or female version of the word. And I used, in general, the male version. And he said, yeah, but you don't know if it's a male or a female doctor. Why did you say the male version? So he's already aware of that because, we have that kind of role models and I expose them to this kind of thinking. And I think that's the main part of it.
Very interesting.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, if I just build on that, Jennifer, I think that's a really important note. And I think just as you were talking, I was reflecting on, just the example of that exchange with your son. I think men have an outsized responsibility to develop greater awareness, and I think it's not built in, and I think that is something that you develop by bringing in partners and individuals that are not like you, that are diverse, that are different, and that begins to open up your mind and begin to realize the deficiencies or the lack of awareness that you would ordinarily have if you were working just with other individuals that share the exact same attributes as yourself. So I just think that men have an outsized role in trying to be aware, and then by being aware, constantly evolving and thinking and accepting and being more open-minded and supporting all those things that are perhaps subtle nuances that you wouldn't pick up on unless you're surrounded by the realities that you look at it and you say I'm blinded to that. It's something that you have to really break through, I think, as a male leader, if your goal indeed is to build a world-class organization that has a diverse set of team members.
This is allyship, right? And the kind of the responsibility that comes with being an ally. And I love that Jennifer focused on, there are things you can do just in the home, just with kind of the nurture side of it. How are we raising our next generation? And then John pointing out on the education side, like there are things we can do across the spectrum of interacting with younger generations. So let's jump ahead to we're going to talk a bit about interviewing and selecting candidates. So we'll start with Gloria. When you're a candidate interviewing for a job, how do you decide if the company is the right match for you from a diversity, whether the company prioritizes diversity or not? What questions can you ask? What should you pay attention to?
Well, I have had the experience of being interviewed by a boss who wanted to convince me that the job is not for me because I'm a woman. That was part of my professional experiences. And I have had interviews from organizations looking for a woman in the position. I have not had the experience of analyzing job offers from the perspective of whether the company is right for me. But it is clear to me that the use of gender criteria, the recognition that men and women can share their family obligations equally, is fundamental. For example, maternity and paternity leave, I think it's very important, especially for children's illness or school activities, on an equitable basis. Also, the recognition in the organizational culture that gender will be a variable to consider for promotions as important as a performance, because it's not only for what to be woman, but also the performance of the woman in this activity and professional activities.
Very good. So the benefits that a company offers, and do they treat maternity and paternity solutions the same way? I'm always amazed how many people I interview that don't ask anything about those sorts of things. Flexible work policies, remote work versus do I always have to be in person? And I think some of it is maybe people are a little bit reluctant to show that sometimes I have to prioritize my children or my family's needs, and that they're worried about exposing that priority in their life during an interview. Let's see, Jennifer, what about on your side? Any interesting experiences with being a candidate and things that you paid attention to?
Yes, definitely. In Germany, it makes a big difference where you apply. So we have been parted, right, separated into the GDR and the German Republic, as you know it now, for quite a while, even though it's more than 30 years ago. But people still think like that. So I used to work in the eastern parts, and it used to be very normal that women also worked, and they worked full time, and they had children. So that's how I grew up. So for me, I never really cared, or I never really doubted that it would be possible to do both. Despite having that dispute about what kind of profession you choose. But in general, that was normal. And when I then started to apply in the southern parts, so now I'm in Munich, and then for the various companies, I got called back and they asked, but you have children, how are you supposed to do that? And as a woman, why would you want to work full-time? And then even as a leader. And I said, I already did that and I was quite successful with it. So why would you doubt me in doing that? And that's when you know this is never going to work. If you have that already in the phone call, you can forget that. And so I changed that around. As you said, Audrey, I got very offensive in that sense. In my cover letter, I already wrote that I have 2 small children and that I like my work and I'm very keen on contributing to my work, but I also want to be there for my children. So I'm looking for a company that can accept that is flexible enough to support that. And then I'm also willing to give a lot in the sense of diversity and in my team leading skills and so on. I would be a good fit to lead into the future. And the company I work for now, they replied and they were happy with it. So I knew I have a lot of support there for my cause.
I love that.
I can only recommend more open with it. If you fear that you might not get the job because of your family issues, be it caring for your children or your elderly parents or whatever it is, if you're afraid of that, there's no use of starting there if the culture doesn't fit you. And it doesn't help, even if you try. If you just do it for the job or for the money or whatever, but you will be miserable. And if you're upfront with whatever your needs are, and the company accepts it during the interview, then you have a much better chance of being happy in that job.
I could not agree more. And John, from the other side, so if you're interviewing candidates to join your company, how do you make sure diversity is considered by the panel or in the interview process?
Yeah, well, I mean, it starts with the interview itself, and who's showing up to the interview. Is it a bunch of is it a series of interviews with 5 white males? I mean, that's telling, right? And when you're in the interview, if you happen to be, on site for an interview, who's walking around and what's the vibe? What is that culture? As you pointed out, Jennifer, what's the culture and what is the living manifestation of that culture? Not what's on the wall that says, here's our core values, but like you can sense it. So I guess I'm just big on sensory perception, when you're setting the stage. And so back to my earlier point, when I described Portal Innovations and how we built ourselves, one of the tenets, is this, create an environment that's welcoming so that we're attracting people that feel like they can be themselves, whatever that, in whatever different, way that may be. And And you can pick up qualitative signals even by being on site at a place and get the feeling that this is, a place that celebrates that diversity. I do a website check. Who's on the website? What are the faces of the website? And again, I'm thinking about this more from a small entrepreneurial venture. Large organizations, a little different kinds of, techniques and considerations need to be brought to bear. But, from the standpoint of venture and startups and, growing quickly types of tech venture type companies, you can get a pretty good view of, like who's on the board, who's on the website, what are they celebrating, and what are the titles of the people that may look like you. Are they individuals that have similar characteristics as you in those roles that you want to be a part of? So I would say that for me, it's about creating the conditions from the standpoint of how we present to the world in the way that we communicate, whether it's through social media posts and the types of things that we celebrate, who we're celebrating and why. Then leading to the job posting and the scope of the role and how we describe, what the opportunity is. And then it's the interview process and who's doing the interview process and who are the leaders, that are doing the recruiting, and are we empowering them to make the decisions ultimately to hire people like them? Those are the ways that we try to create the environment or the conditions to optimize for making sure we get the best and the brightest.
I think it's a great reference to, even in the way a job description is written, you can oftentimes pick out, it could be unconscious bias that is reflected, that they are just thinking about this role in terms of a specific gender. So really great points. On that note, there's a question here that I'll read aloud. Maybe we can start with Gloria. In a team composed of individuals from diverse genders and cultural backgrounds, what strategies or approaches do you believe are the most effective for fostering clear and inclusive communication? Gloria, thoughts on that?
Excuse me. I think the most important is the values of inclusion. And if we put in the description jobs and in the environmental culture organization, the values, and the values means inclusion and gender perspective also. It's very important to put the strategies to incorporate more female collaborators in the organizations. And it also, as of course I speak as a citizen of the third world, of a developing country, and for example, all those arguments that put on the table Jennifer about the natural things that happens in Germany is not the reality in Latin America, for example. And I think for the organizations, it's very important if you have conscience of the importance of incorporate and more female collaborators, you have to be very, very clear to put in the values or organizational perspective.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, any thoughts from you on how to best foster inclusive communication?
I think it helps to assume less. So when you have a very homogeneous group, then the background knowledge is kind of the same. One example, if you have a bunch of physicists sitting on a table and you have maybe one, I had it the other day, there was even a computer scientist next to it. He might be lost already, because when they are all in the same genre, then they all speak the same language. They understand each other, but someone with a different background will not understand. So what I like to do in my teams is that we start at the beginning. So you, whenever you have an issue that you want to discuss, you first explain it again in a few easier words or in different words, and you try to pick up 1 or 2 steps before the actual question, for example, that is being discussed. And you also give room for people to rephrase or to ask questions about the topic. If you can also do that by yourself. If you say you go into a conversation and you start on a certain topic, and then you can ask around if everyone is okay with that, or if there is something to add, if this is clear, for example, if they have understood so far what is the actual issue, for example, before we start discussing a solution. And that helps many people, because in either way, no matter if it's a homogeneous or heterogeneous group, people tend to be scared of asking a question if it feels stupid because they don't understand. Okay. And this happens more and more with the more women you have in the group. They tend to, it might be a bit of a stereotype, but I found it to be true. They tend to not ask a question, but also many men actually don't. And if you give room for that, or if you start asking these questions yourself, then they also get more confidence in asking that, because it's okay to not have that level of background knowledge. And then it becomes more clear, and people understand it better. My husband is a theoretical physicist, and he said, if you want to understand the topic, you have to read 7 books about it and then write one about it yourself to understand it. And I think in that's also true for communication, because you need to see it from different angles before everyone understood what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great ideas. I also like the idea of the leader, whoever is leading a discussion or a topic session, recognizing where diverse thoughts could come from in the group, and recognize who might not be chiming in on their own, and encourage them, find the right way to encourage them to. Sometimes calling on people can be awkward, but asking them a question. What do you think about that idea? I haven't thought hard about that before. What do you think? Finding the right way to bring all of the voices into the group the right way. I find is very much a responsibility of the leader, and sometimes leaders don't realize it, that they could be doing that.
Yeah, so wonder for you. I mean, when it's about space flight, I mean, I guess it's very vital that that it's very clearly communicated, and it's also done well. So I guess you also have
practice a lot. Maybe that's another thing, is that to get good at it, you have to practice. You have to work at it.
Yeah, I think it starts at the top too, and you constantly have to be iterating on that process, and you need to care about it as a leader.
Yep.
And if you care about it, you build it into the way that you're observing how the meeting is going. So, from our perspective, we do regular all hands meetings, and we have a growing set of individuals but with diverse backgrounds, and some are just young and learning, and like you said, shy. And so we do try to, call on them and say, what do you think about that? And bring and draw people into the conversation. And I think if you set the tone in that regard, the other, meetings that happen amongst the other leaders, within the core groups, begins to emanate from that, because that's really that's the behavior that's being celebrated and reinforced, in your own way. And I think there's a lot of tone setting that happens that you need to be mindful of as a leader, and you have a huge opportunity to influence that in a very productive way. Much like you described, Audrey, calling on people but recognizing that you have an outsized role and impact, on how that emanates through the other meetings that happen during the week.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Let me get to our last topic area. I know there are a few more questions in the chat here. I do want to make sure that we touch on retention and development of diverse talent. So once you've succeeded at building a diverse team, how do you keep that team and make sure that they have meaningful opportunities in their career progression? So Gloria, you spent a great deal of your career working with the international governmental organizations. From that perspective, how do you think about developing talent and retaining talent once they're in the organization or in the company?
Yes, indeed, and in the world of international organizations, gender parity has been adopted for nearly 2 or 3 decades. And since then, there has been a note in the job applications informing under equal conditions, priority will be given to women. But however, gender parity has not yet been achieved. There is an increasing incorporation of women, including at senior management level, but much work remains to be done. And you have some heads of the organizations like the FMI or the WTO or the UNCTAD that has a director general who is a woman, but it is not enough. We need to continue working on that. And there are actions made at incorporating more women, and more recently there is an emphasis on incorporating the gender perspective into substantive issues, such as climate change, for example, or intellectual property, or agriculture and trade. And you can find in some organizations groups of work committees who are working of a gender perspective of the substantive issues. And I think this is part of the process to incorporate more and more women and more diversity perspective.
Mm-hmm. And John, in your work with startups, in particular, are you ever in the position to give advice on how to retain diverse talent, how to provide career growth opportunities for that talent once you have it?
Definitely. One of the roles that we have, in the way our venture model works is not only are we investing capital early, but these are, young spinouts that are coming from a university, oftentimes first-time founders, and they're finding their way. And so we also provide mentorship and education and support so that as investors, we are increasing the chances that those companies will succeed. Mm-hmm. And as a component to that mentorship is not only myself, but our team, our diverse team, is guiding these companies to think about, from day one. Remember, they all kind of have an opportunity to work from a clean slate. This is the beginning of the DNA formation. And as I shared my experience in building Portal and building Pyxis and other organizations along the way, starting on day one with that diversity, building that into your DNA becomes, the way that can proliferate long-term and becomes natural. And you don't have to work at it to the extent that you otherwise would need to do that if you're reinventing or starting or turning something around. So we have a big role in helping influence the way that, these first-time founders start to build out their team, whether it's a scientist working at the bench and finding the best and the brightest in that regard, or hiring the chief scientific officer, the CEO for that matter, building out the board, guiding these individual founders is a real opportunity for us. And I would say the same thing is true for any venture firm. Even if you don't have lab space, you have an outsized role of being an influence, how you build a balanced organization from day one. And it all starts with being, just very pragmatically having a conviction that balance will lead to profound outcomes, in the case of a biotech company for patients, because they're going after diseases that, are yet unsolved. And oftentimes, if the team is made up of diverse individuals that are thinking in a different way, perhaps, you're going after new markets that wouldn't have been thought about by, a very homogenous, organization that gets started and that gets perpetuated kind of down that same path.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, what about you, particularly for, female populations of employees? What should companies focus on to retain to retain them and make sure they're staying with companies for a long time and progressing to leadership positions?
I think it again comes back to the respectful environment. So if everyone is heard in the same way, and if you have the possibility to grow or stay in your position depending on what you want and how you perform, and not so much on what are your boundary conditions, then I think this can get you very far. It's basically what John said too. If you as a woman, if you have the chance to also progress, and if you have the chance to have a career, and you don't only stay where you were, and other people also see that, when they see that there is that possibility within that particular company. But for example, if you have an environment in which it's very common for the management to meet usually late in the evenings or stay for overnight workshops and some retreats and all these things, then this clashes with anyone, no matter if a man or woman, that has to take care of some family members, for example. And so that means that by that culture, you already exclude a big fraction of your workforce from progressing into that stage. If it's about knowing the right people or staying late in the evening, for example, with certain people and so on. So I think that has the biggest impact. And one thing that is also important, I find, is asking your employees what they want and what they can do. I had a funny encounter in one of the management trainings, and it was on diversity, and there was an older white guy telling us that the question was, who should you ask to attend a customer meeting late at night? It was supposed to be like at 9 in the evening, and a phone call with some, abroad customer, as it sometimes happens. You can also see it's already dark here in Germany. So who do you ask? Do you ask the single male guy who wants to go to his football training, very German, or do you ask the single mother who has a kid at home? And then everyone was, of course, you ask the single guy to attend that meeting. And I held my hand up and said, guys, can't you just ask them? Because at 9 in the evening, my kid is asleep, and if it's my customer, I want to call them. And I'm happy to call them at 9 in the evening because I like my job, and my kid could be in bed, and I would be fine with it. But if you don't ask me, if you only assume that I don't want to do it because of my boundary conditions, then I'm never able to grow. So,
and just jumping in again, just from that perspective, Jennifer, very, very enlightening. And I think that it's just further kind of underscores the importance of speaking up in those environments too, and the recognition, again, from the male perspective, that you have to be surrounded. And I take my daughter Peggy, is a mountain guide, and it's a very male-dominated sport. And so I learned so much from Peggy about awareness and thinking, because she shares stories about what her path is like. Yeah. And it's just almost hard to believe. But it's true. I know it's true. And so, if we think about that, like that influence on me is also pouring into the way I think about, or I'm aware of, or sometimes I have to stop myself or hear from someone, hey, did you realize what you just did there? I think it's important that we're always transparent and communicating, because there's an educational process, as leadership, continues to diversify.
Mm-hmm. I think I love the idea of transparency. There's a way to be polite and professional and increase someone's awareness of the position that you're in. And it strikes me when I have the opportunity to engage with younger engineers, particularly females, that so many of them say, I just want to be given the opportunity to do the thing, whether it's going to the customer meeting or going to that retreat or whatever it is. Like, some people just assume that I can't because I just had a child last year, or I can't work it out. And I just want to be given the opportunity and have a conversation with me about, could you do this? Do you want to do this? Is it easy or challenging to? And, if you're on the receiving end of that communication, also have a little bit of empathy, because this person is trying to understand more. And I think that bringing empathy to all of we talked a lot about communication here, and I think empathy is so important in helping to educate your colleagues and the people around you, that I I do want these opportunities. These things might be challenging, or it might have to go a different way than we all had in mind. And I think those two things are so valuable to these interactions and to help folks get educated. I want to check in with Emily. I want to make sure we're not running over on time. I don't know if we have time for another one more question, or Emily or Liana.
Sorry, can you hear me, Audrey?
Yes, hello.
Sorry, I'm having connectivity nightmare.
Okay,
thank you. I was just about to say, I think it's the perfect moment to have the last couple of Q&A comments and questions. If we could take 2 minutes before that, if I just post a link in the chat, if everyone would please take 2 minutes to give us some quick feedback, because we're always trying to improve these sessions and move forward in the right direction for everyone. If that's okay, and then we'll move on to the last couple of questions.
Okay. Yep. So look for the chat here, and please provide feedback so we can make these things meaningful to all of you who join. There is one follow-up question in the chat here on the communication topic. Should the focus be on finding a neutral communication style, or should there be some like different approach to acknowledging diversity? And I've had this question a lot in some of the diversity efforts we've run here at my company. A lot of folks in the United States just kind of default to, "Hey guys," when they're joining me, and they don't literally mean "hello gentlemen," they mean "hello all of you, hi team." And so there's this focus on use words like team, hi team, or folks, or something like that. And any opinions in the group on, should there be a focus on kind of this neutral communication style, or should it not matter? Should we take a different approach?
I just had that discussion actually with my grandmother last week. She's 81 now, and she grew up in the GDR. So for her, they always use that generic masculinum, they call it. And so in Germany, everything is very male dominated. But she always felt counted too, because my mom was a bricklayer, for example, and for us it was normal that men and women do the same things, kind of. And I mean, not entirely, but still. And so for her that was unthinkable. She said neutral language is, why would you need that? But now that I'm in a more conservative part of the country, I actually start using a more neutral language. So I also, instead of man hours, I say person hours and so on, because just to make people aware. I think it depends on where you are. If you are already in a fairly diverse environment, then I don't think you need to focus on it so much. It just naturally occurs that people are just naturally fine. But if you have one or the other dominated, be it male or female, doesn't matter which one of the two it is, depending on your topic you're in, then that might be worthwhile to think about it every now and then, just to keep everyone a bit on their toes.
Indeed.
I would reinforce that it needs to evolve. And I would admit to myself, especially being a Chicago person, that's a difficult transition. And so back to empathy, those are it's so ingrained, it's so, I think that, but on the other hand, there should not, why should we relieve ourselves from, evolving the language and how we identify, even in those, what would seem to be kind of trivial moments. They do take on outsized proportions in the context of continuing to support a very diverse and welcoming culture.
There was a follow-up on, how do you inspire leaders to start doing what you're talking about, John, changing the manner of communication and the means of communication. And I think I return to, probably somebody doesn't want to be called out in front of a group of 20 people. So maybe, take the opportunity on a sidebar or after a meeting to say, hey, consider whether using a different type of language and like have a conversation about it. Don't, rather than direction, kind of, the empathy thread, understand where they might be coming from. It might be very, very ingrained in their upbringing and their culture, kind of to the points that Jennifer and John are making. Gloria, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. I think indeed it's a matter of content of the message to be inclusive in the language. And well, if you speak Spanish, for example, you have a male domination in the conversations by the generic, because the generic it's always in masculine perspective, not but that means that it's inclusive. It's not true. It's not true, and we need to work on that, because it's the message. It's the most important is the message, and the most important is the neutral perspective of the message.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to think about. If you speak multiple languages, the differences that the languages force you to, the languages themselves force a type of communication style. Yeah, very, very good perspective. Thanks. So I think I lost my chat here, so I don't know if we first have other questions or if we have time for other questions. So I think unless Liana or Emily is going to interrupt.
I was just going to put those last two questions on the screen, Audrey, if you wanted to get through them.
Okay. If we have time to, it'd be great if you could post them. Let's see. How can teams proactively address any potential biases or misconceptions surrounding neurodiversity in the workplace? How do you all deal with biases and misconceptions?
I would actually like to say something on that one. So from neurodiversity, I understand this is also about being on the autistic spectrum. So me working in physics, I worked with a lot of different people, let's say, and there are many actually more or less on some side of the spectrum. And the thing is that as long as you are open to their quirks, if you listen, it comes back again to empathy. If you listen on what is important to each individual and you make work of those, then you create a trusting environment. And as soon as there is trust, then people also start working together. For example, I do have a diagnosed autist in my team. And that was one of the first things he said to me when I started. And I'm fairly dominant in my communication, or I'm fairly, open, extrovert kind of person. And he definitely is not. For him, this is all very difficult. But he was open about it. And I bluntly asked him, because I know that he wouldn't be offended, what he needs, what are the things that are very important to him, what are the rules I have to live by in order to make it comfortable for him. And in the beginning, it was very held back, but in the end, not at the end, but now 2 years later, he opens up. And even when I make mistakes, like I promised him something and then I didn't deliver 2 years ago, that would have been a big deal. But because we have a trusting relationship, now he came around and he said, it's okay, I found another way to make it work for me. And I was so proud of him that he did that all by himself, and that it was okay for him, and that also within the team, that people can deal with that very nicely. There are a few rules, you need to live by, but that is, if you think about it, that's true for everyone. There are these people that in the morning, like they say, don't talk to me before I ate and before I had my 2 coffees. Those don't have to be on the spectrum. I am also like that.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you abide to all these things, and if you try to be a bit open and accommodate that, then you don't need to have any biases around that. They can work together very nicely. And he's one of my best performers in the team, and everyone's glad to have him on board.
And how powerful that your team will see you behave that way and reach out and engage and say, what do I need to do to help you be most successful? And that's a conversation I would have with anyone on my team. And to celebrate the contributions maybe of that person, so that others see like, wow, I don't need to pay attention to this aspect of this person. I need to pay attention to what they're contributing to this team. I love that. It's great perspective. I can't see your lovely faces, so if someone else wanted to jump in, go ahead.
I was just going to reinforce, if you're developing a respectful culture, you are reinforcing it with bringing in others that are respectful as well. And it's not limited. That diversity is not limited to gender or ethnicity. It's respectful of who that person is, allowing them to be who they are and getting the benefit of all that goes with that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I think with that, I'll thank our great panel here. It was really wonderful. This was the first time I've met John and Jennifer and Gloria, and I'm so impressed by your backgrounds and the work you've done and this great conversation that you brought to the table. So thanks so much, and thank you, Emily and Liana, and whoever else might be joining in, for inviting us to have this conversation. Really, really appreciate it.
And a huge thank you to you, Audrey, for navigating through that, and to all the other panelists, Gloria, John, and Jennifer. It was a really great and insightful discussion. Thank you all so much. And thanks to everyone for attending.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Audrey. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Gloria.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Visit community.eithealth.eu to join our community and shape the healthcare landscape with us. For more such videos, subscribe to our channel.